Hey everyone, welcome to the Talkin' Soccer podcast. Of course, we've been doing this on YouTube exclusively, but branching out a little bit. I'm going to do one long-form podcast, ideally every week. Going to have some interviews. It won't be interviews every week, but we're going to talk soccer with an emphasis on women's soccer, with an emphasis on Kansas City. Leads me to what we're talking about today. Obviously, tomorrow is the NWSL final in Washington, D.C. According to Meg Linehan, 1,000 tickets away from a sellout, so they're expecting a sellout by tomorrow, which for a neutral site final where Kansas City is 1,000 miles away, Portland is 2,800 miles away, that's pretty damn impressive for a league that's had its ups and downs this year especially, but it seems like we're having all-time attendance numbers throughout the league. We're having all-time viewership numbers throughout the league. And it seems like it's on the right track, even if sponsorship dollars are a little bit up. And even if the league itself, sentiment-wise, has a lot of reformation to do after the Yates Report, post-CBA, it's in a very good spot. So, as I said earlier, we're going to throw to Leo Baudhuin, who is in Eugene, covers the Portland Thorns, covers the Portland Timbers in various outlets. But I wanted to bring Leo in to talk a bit about Portland since I don't cover them day to day. I'm obviously familiar. Anyone who covers the NWSL is familiar with most of the teams since it is a 10-team league, but my emphasis is on KC. So I wanted to get a good idea of the day-to-day outlook in Portland. And of course, I want to know a little bit about Mayor Paulson as well and kind of where the fan base is on him not going to the final and the fact that that was even a rumored thing. So I want to talk to him for a bit. Then also I talked with Chardonnay Curran of the Kansas City Current, going through her rookie year, about her ups and downs this season, her role in the team, what it's like making the final, and what it's like moving from Oregon to KC, moving from the NCAA to the NWSL, and just the different expectations that puts upon you. So let's throw to my talk with Leo. So first, before we throw to my talk with Leo, how did we get here? Of course, Kansas City Current, coming off a last place finish in 2021, drafted Chardonnay Curran, drafted Elise Bennett in the offseason, made trades for Lynn Williams and Sam Mewis, USWNT superstars who Lynn Williams would get hurt in the first game of the Challenge Cup. Sam Mewis had injury setbacks throughout the year, so wasn't able to play for KC this year. Although they both seem like they're looking forward to next year. Lynn Williams is actually in the warm-ups in the practice today before tomorrow's game. So obviously they are integrated into the team. They just haven't been able to play, which gives you hope that next year, coming in with those two, coming in with Claire Laviger, some interesting decisions with Des Scott being a free agent as well. Could be another year of turnovers, but some young players in Elise Bennett and Chardonnay Curran that are already making a difference for this team could step up as well. Of course, the big change for the Current came when they changed formations. It's been a talking point, but it's a talking point because it was kind of the catalyst for their record-breaking unbeaten run, and the catalyst for what eventually saw them catapult in the first place for a few weeks before finishing 5th in the season. But of course, they changed from a 4-3-3 to a 3-5-2 / it's very fluid. It's a fluid formation, but there's 3 at the back. You have Haley Maish, Kate Delfava as your wings. You have a defensive mid. You have 2 mids in the center, and you have 2 attackers. And they play very fluid throughout the midfield, throughout the attack, but that defensive structure is what makes the difference. They're very high pressing. They force other teams to make mistakes through that press. And then you have Des Scott, you have Alex O'Hara, who make you pay through those mistakes, who just kind of absorb the ball into their orbit and can find an outlet pass. That's how KC has been successful this year. Total team buy-in, total team defense, and of course, great goalkeeping from AD Franch, who is having a career resurgence as well. That cannot be understated. AD Franch was not her usual self last year. Moving from Portland she was, competing for time with Bella Bixby. She was not the out and out starter. And honestly, she probably wasn't playing up to that level. If you look at her stats from last year, she was barely above league average as far as goalkeeping stats go. She was not in the top 12 for expected goals saved per 90. And that's huge for AD, because AD would come into this year, she'd be ranked third in expected goals saved per 90. She'd made a ton of saves. She kept a ton of clean sheets. Set the record for playoff clean sheets in the game last weekend. And that's how we get here. Kansas City finished 5th on the final day, where they could have finished anywhere from 1st to 5th. But they go into Houston, they win. They go into Seattle, and they beat OL Reign. Now they go to DC to play the Portland Thorns. Speaking of the Portland Thorns, that is where I will leave us into my conversation with Leo Baudhuin. And hopefully we'll learn a little bit about Portland, who MVP now, youngest MVP in the history of the league, Sophia Smith. They have great goalkeeping and great defense as well. And honestly, options all over the field with Crystal Dunn, Christine Sinclair coming off the bench. It's a tough prospect for a KC Curran fan looking forward. But I think it's going to be a fun game. It's going to be an exciting game. Honestly, I didn't feel comfortable ahead of any of these games. And maybe Houston. I thought that KC would beat Houston, but that game wasn't as comfortable as you maybe wanted it to be. And of course, last week I was very afraid of what OL Reign can do. But they won 2-0 on the back of AD Franch, on the back of total team defense, on the back of Kristen Hamilton scoring an amazing goal in the second half. So without further ado, let's move to my talk with Leo, and then we'll move to my talk with Chardonnay Curran after that. All right, everyone, welcome back. I have special guests with me today. I thought it'd be fun since I am not as familiar on the Thorns on a day-to-day level as my friend Leo here is. Leo, how are you doing today? How's it going?
I am pretty good. It's like finally not pouring rain here in Eugene.
Nice, yeah.
It's very cloudy still, so it's possible that will happen a little bit later. But
from
like,
what I know,
out the window, yeah, that's a win.
From what I know about your part of the world, it's a beautiful day here in KC too. So like this is like championship weather to me. These fall days with like look outside, a lot of beautiful trees. That's my life. Mm-hmm. So Leo, I thought it'd be a good place to start to kind of like ask you a little bit about like your confidence level in the Thorns heading into tomorrow. Kind of where are you at ahead of this game?
I think feeling pretty good. I do feel like Kansas City is also a really good team, but if you just like look at the Thorns roster, they're just like insanely talented, and they have shown time and time again that they can score really good goals, and they can score goals in a lot of different ways, which I think is pretty key to winning a championship. And I think they're also defensively a really strong team. So there aren't, I feel like on paper, any like glaring weaknesses. And I think that bodes pretty well for them. And I think they have really shown that they can come together as a team. And I think this has been a hard year for them, but I think they've really rallied on the field for each other. And I think that's been really cool to see. How are you feeling about Kansas City?
Yeah, I mean, Portland's attack definitely scares me. I feel anxious. I'm an anxious sports fan. So I was feeling a little bit nervous last week out of Seattle because I feel the same thing. Like KC, for as good of like a team they are, they have like this team cohesion that I feel like no one else in the NWSL can really keep up with in terms of their like counter press and their defense for sure. But like they don't really have like an out and out striker necessarily. So it always really like worries me when you look at Portland's roster and like especially with Sophia Smith. But if you stop Sophia Smith, then you still have Morgan Weaver and Yasmin Ryan, and like that's a scary front three to me.
Right. And then you have like Crystal Dunn coming off the bench
coming off the
with
bench,
like 30 minutes left in a game, and you can bring like Christine Sinclair in, and like that's kind of insane to like even last game be able to bring that caliber of player off your bench.
Yeah, it's like really interesting because KC's bench is pretty young. Like they have they drafted well, like Elise Bennett and Chardonnay Curran, who I'm actually talking with a little bit later today. Like they're young, they're talented, and they're like really good soccer players, but also they've like never been in this situation before when you can look at like you can bring Christine Sinclair off the bench and
right. They do have the advantage of AD French playing for the Thorns and playing with a lot of these players. So obviously she's been lights out for Kansas City, but also like knowing specifically the players that she's going up against is maybe helpful.
Some of their tendencies, like especially if we get to like a PK situation. Yeah.
Right.
How do you feel like from your side of things, like seeing AD French leave like through the trade last year and like understanding that last season's AD French is not this season's AD French? Like, what are your thoughts like from the outside looking in on how she's played this season?
I haven't caught as many Kansas City games as I would have liked, but from what I've seen, she's been phenomenal. I think when she came into KC, I was like a little bit dubious because I think what she does really well is I think she's a very strong like shot stopper. And I especially remember last year when I was watching more KC games, it looked like she was being asked to come a little bit further off her line and play as like a little bit more of a like sweeper keeper in certain situations, which is like something she can do, but I don't think it's playing to her strengths as the same way as the Thorns did last year when they dropped back really far defensively and then kind of let her just like purely be a shot stopper. But also, again, she's one of the best goalkeepers in the league, if not the best goalkeeper in the league. I think she like is fantastic, and I think she has done incredibly well for Kansas City this season.
Yeah, it's hard to really like, because I've written about it a few times now, but it's hard to put into perspective like just how like out to lunch that defense was last year compared to this year. Like they have such a strong like defense is kind of their strong suit this year with like the way that Des Scott kind of sits in front of the back line and the way that since they move into a back three have been just like such a like solid group. And I think because they went to a back three, they can kind of like share some of the load that last year you had young defenders that were just kind of being asked to do too much. And that's where AD French, I don't know if it was necessarily that she was being asked to come out more, but I think it was almost like she felt like she needed to do more to like have an impact.
Yeah, that's also a fair way of putting it.
Where's kind of so like looking at this Portland team, like where are your like areas of concern heading into tomorrow, let's say?
I honestly think it's like gonna be a game on both sides that comes down to small moments where teams make mistakes. And I think Kansas City is a team that can capitalize on that. And I think the Thorns are also a team that can capitalize on that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just going to be whichever team is able to take advantage of whichever team makes a mistake. And I think we saw that against San Diego, where their goal comes from leaving Taylor Korniak just like unmarked in the box, which silly little thing to do.
Yeah,
you know, if a player
giving
like
Alex
6'2",
Morgan like 2 minutes on the ball wasn't smart either.
Right. So I honestly think it's going to be something like that. I think the Thorns are overall a really strong team, and I think Kansas City is also overall a really strong team, and they are very determined to fight for each other. And I think that also takes you really far.
Yeah, I think that's what gets me like excited for the actual like in-game matchup, because both teams, like you said, can like score out of nothing almost at times. Like the clinching goal from Kristen Hamilton last week was like very much against the run of play, and she was able to kind of turn the defenders inside out. But like you still got the sense that like, oh, Rain could come back and score at any moment. They probably like should have a few times.
And that's what you have AD French for.
Right. A great eraser. Yeah. What are your like, how confident are you in what Bella Bixby's been doing this year?
I think she's been, again, like she's a really solid keeper. I think I'm glad that she is now in a position where she gets to start in this league, because I think she absolutely deserves that. Yeah, I think not a lot of like specific things, but I think I have a lot of confidence in her. And I think she's like all around like a very good player.
Yeah. That's why the AD trade like fascinates me so much, because it's like, okay, you move out someone who is a goalkeeper of the year, but also like you have someone who you want to give a lot more playing time to that you haven't been able to with like AD there. So that's kind of the fascinating part about it.
And it's not like then the Thorns are like down a starting keeper, because Bella Bixby is also a starting caliber keeper.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's cool that they now both get to get those minutes, as sad as I was. Like AD is someone I like watched growing up, and like I think like a lot as a player, but like as sad as that was for me personally, like again, Bella Bixby is also fantastic.
Yeah, and like as a fan of like the league and of the players in general, you don't want to see someone who could be starting somewhere just be like sitting back there and just like
Right.
waiting for their opportunity.
Yeah.
Cool. So what is your all right, so let's do this. What is your like very specific vibe check for tomorrow? Like what is something that you think has to happen for Portland to win?
Um, my last week take was that or Sunday, that Scorpio season, Rocky Rodriguez going off, known Scorpio. Also, both the goalkeepers are going to be Scorpios. So I think someone who's a Scorpio
This
is
is big
going to
news
do
for me.
something really cool. And I don't think that's a hot take if both the goalkeepers are Scorpios, honestly. Like, it's going to happen.
One of the goalies are going to make good saves. I think that's a
Yeah,
game.
I think probably both of them will make some kind of game saving save at some point. I also don't think that's a hot take, but
yeah,
I think, yeah.
I think, you know, I specialize in lukewarm takes, so it's okay. Like, my key to the game would be stopping Sophia Smith, obviously. Like,
Yeah. I also think Morgan Weaver has historically really shown up in these like big championship games or like these big moments. And I think she's also someone to watch as well
big
as
game
like,
player.
yeah.
She played well last week, too. Like, it's not like that comes out of nowhere.
Right. It's not like she's like, yeah, coming out of nowhere, first goal of her career, but like historically, these are the games where she really shines. And so I'm excited to see what she does with it.
Yeah, that's what scares me about Portland. There's so many like big name, like big game players on that roster. So since I have you here, Leo, I want to kind of talk about Merritt Paulson and obviously everything that's happened with the Yates Report. We've gone over time and time again, but Merritt saying that he's not going to be there in attendance in DC, which is probably a good thing.
I was honestly not gonna lie, was kind of surprised that that was like news.
Yeah,
I feel like just like based on everything that's happened, he shouldn't have been there.
where is kind of like as someone who is more entrenched in the fan base, like with the potential ownership groups looking to buy the team, like what's the confidence level there as far as like where Merritt Paulson is at and like if you think he's actually going to sell?
I think we have seen that fans are very committed to Merritt selling, and I think we have seen that they have gotten a lot of strong statements from a number of sponsors. They've gotten sponsors to withdraw. And I think if they can keep up that momentum and they have an off season where that's like something that they can specifically focus on, I think that is within the realm of possibility in a way that I feel like it wasn't even when the Athletic story came out like 13 months ago. I think the way we've seen fans really rally around that, I think on the Thorns side and also on the Timbers side. So it's not even just a like Thorns Paul Riley effort. It's also a like Andy Polo covering up domestic abuse. Like we've seen that on both sides of
Yeah, it's
ownership.
like
So it's
complete
also like
organizational like mishap.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so I think that also makes them stronger because as big as the Thorns are in Portland, the Timbers are also really big in Portland. I think I'm encouraged. I don't think I'm like 100% like this is going to happen, but I think just like from what we've seen so far, there's a lot of fans who are really angry and understandably so. And hopefully that's going to be enough.
Yeah, I mean, like fans are in such a difficult position because you want to like make your protest heard, but you also don't want to like distract and make the players like suffer for like what their owner has done. So like
Right.
that's why I thought the like fan protest last week was pretty cool.
Right. I think that's why I'm like especially encouraged by like sponsors withdrawing, because if you still want to support the players, obviously there are fans who are not comfortable giving that team any sort of money at this point, and so like aren't going to be going to games. And I know other fans who will like only get tickets from like other people who have bought tickets, so they're not directly supporting ownership. but I think sponsors withdrawing is like a pretty big financial loss, and it's a pretty big statement on that behalf, where you still see fans really rallying around supporting the players, which I think is really cool. And also when you talk about supporting the players, that's like specifically what the players on this team have asked for. They have been like, please show up to our games, like please still support us because we still have a job to do. And I think also like listening to that voice is really important. And so I think it's
yeah, like especially like ultimately the Yates Report was in response to the players in a way. So like you still want to do right by them even when you're trying to like make your voice heard as a supporter and as like a fan of the league.
And like also like very much understand if you're that like I don't want to go to games. Like personally, I don't want to give that club money.
I don't want to give
that like sitting in the press box. Like I don't have to like buy a ticket to attend games. Like that I think is something that would be like a whole thing that I'd have to unpack if I did not have that privilege.
And like ultimately what do rich people listen to? It's like the bottom line. So you got to make them hurt in a way that they're going to understand, because like public discourse, they can just hide from the media and it like has no impact, as like Merritt's doing essentially.
And Merritt loves fighting people on Twitter. So like discourse is not going to be the thing that gets him out of the club.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's like fascinating, but sometimes when you're like halfway across the country, it's hard to get like a read of where exactly the fan base is in terms of like at this very moment. So I appreciate that insight. Well, cool. Well, Leo, thank you so much for joining. Where can people like find more of your work, follow you if they want to interact with you in the future?
I am on Twitter at not a Leo, but Leo, because my name's Leo and I'm a Gemini, and I do some silly astrology stuff sometimes. I've kind of been freelancing all over, but I think my main website over the past couple of years has been the Rose City Review, which is a group of Portland writers covering the Thorns and the Timbers. I think we have kind of dropped off in coverage this season just based on none of our reporters actually being in Portland. But I think we are trying to revamp that hopefully next year. So that's something to keep an eye on, where I think at Rose City Review 1 on Twitter is, I believe, our handle.
I'll put it in the show notes. It'll be down there.
Okay. Cool. Also just like kind of freelancing all over where I can find people who will take my writing. So
I know that life.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. Well, thanks, Leo. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate that insight.
And thanks so much for having me. And
No
best of luck to Kansas City. I honestly like grew up with the Thorns, obviously rooting for them, but I like can't even be mad if Kansas City wins, because I think the way that they've built this team over the past year has been very cool to see.
It's fun. And it's very like player focused, like very player focused with like fan feedback oriented, which is like as someone who, like, I'm from St. Louis, but I lived in KC. Like, as someone who had like his football team just like up and leave him, it's nice to have a team that like actually feels like it's part of the community. So like you appreciate that.
Right. Also, I'm an 80 French fan, like first and foremost.
And who isn't?
Like, if she wins the championship again, really can't be mad about it.
Yeah. Like, yeah, she's just such a baller of a player. And like no one has her level of intensity too. That's what I really appreciated about her, like watching every game this year. So again, I want to thank Leo for hopping in. That was a great conversation. I actually learned quite a bit about the whole Merritt Pawson situation. You can follow Leo at Not a Leo on Twitter to see where he's writing for these days. Just like me, you gotta go where they'll accept your writing. Now to change gears a little bit, I talked with Chardonnay Curran today after media day, so it looks like they are doing a lot up there. KC had their practice earlier today. On other KC notes, Claire Lavage successfully had ACL surgery, so that's something to look forward to as well, that she is now on the mend. Lynn Williams was practicing with the team today. Sam Mewis has been rumored to be getting back in the mix. A lot of news for KC, even if tomorrow doesn't go their way, but let's hope that does. So let's move to my talk with Chardonnay Curran, and we'll touch base in a second. Glad I had the opportunity to talk to you, because I wanted to like ask you a little bit about like what it's like coming into the current team, like in this setup with the veterans on the team, and then ask you a little bit about the championship and like how that's impacting you too. But so to start
Yeah, for
things
sure.
off, of course, you get drafted from Oregon. You have like a very prolific career there, but you come in with a bunch of veterans in a locker room and coming into a new team. What was that transition like coming from the NCAA level to the NWSL level?
I feel like it was definitely more mature in
Yeah.
ways. It was kind of scary in the beginning just because one, I'm from Hawaii, two, I'm from Oregon. We've never made it to the tournament, like sadly.
Hmm.
So I've never been a part of like a very like winning environment, I guess. And all these girls have been there. They've been at the highest levels. They've been on like national teams. We have the US, Canadian girls. But everyone was just very welcoming in the beginning. And so I feel like it wasn't too crazy of a transition, but uh it was just I thought it was like good. The culture here is great. So it's
Yeah, and
been
like
pretty easy.
you've obviously found a spot in the roster and everything too, so that has to make things a little easier.
Yeah. In the beginning it was going well and then my role kind of changed, which was good. I mean, like I'm learning a lot from it. Just a little different, but still having fun. So that's what matters most.
Right. Was there like, did you have any idea that like Casey was looking at you? Did you have like conversations before the draft, or was it kind of a surprise when you figured out you were coming to Casey?
My draft day was actually like very funny. One, I was not even gonna enter the draft, so
Hmm.
that was just a whole lot. And then on draft day, I had talked to a few teams, and like I kind of knew when I was being picked. And then it was funny because I was supposed to go with Chicago, the pick after Casey. So I was like, all right, getting ready to set up the cameras, whatever, but like, this is me. And then out of nowhere, I got the phone call. And I was like, who the heck? Like, who's calling me? Like, I don't know this area code, nothing.
Some
And
816
then,
number.
yes. And then when I was getting drafted, there was a commercial on. So I didn't even know that I was up. And then I ended up obviously answering the phone and they're like, hi, like, this is Hugh. Like, this is Hugh from Kansas City. And I'm like, cool. Like, I didn't know what to say, obviously, but I just didn't know I was getting picked up by them. I never spoke to them. I didn't know they were aware of who I was and whatnot. So it was like all a surprise.
Yeah, that's incredibly interesting. That's fun to hear. Like I'm sure like just throws you completely off your rhythm for draft day then.
Yeah, for sure. It was a crazy draft day experience.
So moving forward a little bit, so you get into the team, your role changes over the course of the year, but you still see minutes in like very important games, especially in the playoffs. Like how has that been? Like being kind of, I don't want to use the word like impact sub necessarily, but that's kind of the role that you have these days. Like, what's that kind of been being someone who has been relied on in like important minutes in that way?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was kind of, um, how do I explain this? Because I was like starting in the beginning
Yeah,
and then I became like this game changer, what we call us.
I like that
So
word.
at
Yeah.
first it was just like, oh, like obviously I need to work harder. Like there's something that I need to change to get on the field. And then as it became my role, I was just like, you know what, just accept this and you need to do whatever you have to do for this team and just contribute in any way. And any minutes that I saw, I just try to take advantage of it and just do what I can for this team.
Yeah, I like the game changer attitude. I think that's a fun like way to look at it because that's like exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And then so going from that to like I talked to Kristen Hamilton before, and she talked about how like there was a like big meeting before the season. Everyone kind of like talked about their ambitions and like looking at the playoffs. Like, how has like the overall team environment? Like, it seems like you guys keep things pretty loose, but how has it kind of adjusted as like the maybe the pressure ramps up a little bit throughout the season?
I think one thing about our team is like we no one business is business, but
Hmm.
we just always leave room to have fun. And I think that's probably one of our best traits is just even during serious moments, like we're still allowed to be ourselves and everyone's just so supportive of each other. And I could not tell you how fun this team is. Like I've been a part of many teams, but this team, the culture is just great. It's just have fun, do your part and get things done. And that's pretty much what we have done.
yeah, like from the outside looking at it, definitely looks like you guys like know when to turn it on, right? Like obviously it's super competitive on the field. It almost seems like it's like play for you guys when you're out there.
Yeah, it's been great, and it's just been cool to see because, as you mentioned, like preseason, like this team has talked about a lot of things that they want to change, especially after how their season went last year, and everything that they've talked about, literally everything we discussed throughout season, like we've just been putting in the work, and we're just doing it. Like that's what I've been telling everybody in the media too. Like we've talked about it, and it's being done.
Just take care of business.
Right.
Chardonnay, I got to ask because I was watching TikTok the other day when Kate Del Fava had the mic'd up and I saw you whip out a bicycle kick. How often do you do that in practice?
I like to bring it out.
It was buried in the video.
I like to bring it out here and there. I don't want to show that yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a few tricks up my sleeve. Just when I feel it and I feel it come naturally, like it just comes. Like I don't even plan for it. Like next thing you know, I'm like, oh, I'm on the ground, and I just did the bike.
No, I liked it. It was good. It was a nice surprise to see in the video.
Thank you. That's
yeah,
funny.
and then talking about your team environment. Like obviously, the big talking point this year has been the Yates Report, and that kind of dropped. As you were preparing for the playoffs, like team environment wise, like I know KC is very player focused. Like how has that conversation been with like ownership and with the front office, like since the report came out in terms of like accountability and what the players are looking for really?
I mean, we obviously have our captains who are pretty much the messenger from both sides. But like whenever we have some sort of disagreement or we think that something should be better, like there are spokes people, and anytime we ask for something, we pretty much get, and we get more than we expected. And I just think our ownership they've done a great job at advocating for us women in general, not just for our team. And they just been investing so much of their time, their money. Just you can just tell that like they're very invested in us, and it feels great. Like knowing that we have owners like that. Like even just me personally, it's like, oh, I have another reason to work harder. Like I have another reason to do this, another reason to keep going, even during tough times. Like it's just a reminder. Like people are out here sacrificing their time, and they have their own family too. So I'm just like, I can always go harder. And our front office and our people behind the scenes, like our media team, like they're doing a great job. Like they show that we have just as much fun too. And I just think all around, like everyone being on the same page and everyone working together and just being able to distinguish like players, staff, when it's our time, when it's their time, when it's our time to mingle and join each other and just appreciate the things we've done together. It's been really nice.
Yeah, I was at the groundbreaking for the stadium, and like coming on the heels of the Yates Report, it was kind of like powerful when Angie Long got up there and talked. And
yeah, they're great people.
Yeah, it's very cool to see. Well, Chardonnay, I appreciate you hopping on and talking with me for a little bit. Like, good luck tomorrow, obviously, and I look forward to catching up down the line. So thank you again to Chardonnay for hopping on. That TikTok I talked about, I'll put that down in the show notes because it's pretty great. It's Kate Del Fava mic'd up, and then in the background, Chardonnay Curran just pulls off a bike in the middle of practice. So if you like seeing bikes pulled out, you'll like that. But looking forward to tomorrow, I think Chardonnay gave us a lot of insight of where this team's mindset is, of just how confident they are in their own ability and the way that they play together, the way they are stronger together. And that's kind of this team's ethos, even in the face of a Portland Thorns team that is a tough team. They've been there before. They're bringing Crystal Dunn and Christine Sinclair off the bench. It's going to be a fun game. I think that sets it up well. Thank you all so much for listening to the podcast today, the inaugural Talking Soccer podcast. I'll be back next week. Of course, next week we'll kind of tie up some loose ends with the NWSL final, and we're going to talk some Champions League also. That's kind of where we'll go with this pod. We're going to talk, women's soccer all over the world. We're going to talk soccer all over the world. Of course, if you followed me from the Soccer Talk Lads podcast, I talk St. Louis City SC over there. I might bring some of that over here, but for the most part, this will be more hard-hitting interviews and things like that, where we get a little bit loosey-goosey over there. So thank you all so much for watching, for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you give it a little thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast player. If you can rate me, go ahead. Let me know what you think of the podcast. Even if you hated it, I always appreciate the ratings. They're going to help get me in front of other people. And I appreciate you. So friends, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. It's going to be fun tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Less than 24 hours to go. So, we'll talk soon.